Ever find yourself staring out at your lawn and wondering why it just can't seem to catch a break? You're watering, you're mowing, you might even be giving it pep talks, but still, something's just off.
Well, get ready to become a lawn detective, because today's deep dive is all about cracking the code of the struggling lawn. And the answer might just lie in the surprising world of soil salinity.
We're driving deep into this salty situation with the help of an awesome guide from Oklahoma State University.
Turns out the key to a happy lawn might not be more fertilizer or even more sunshine. It could be understanding what's happening with the salt hiding out down in the soil.
You know, you've hit on something that a lot of people don't realize. Most folks, they think about salt and they think about the ocean, right? It's actually way more common than that. Even if you're miles from the coast, your soil and your lawn too could be feeling the effects.
So we're not just talking about a little sprinkle of sea salt here and there.
Nope, not at all. There are actually a couple of ways salinity can build up in soil naturally. One of them is called weathering. Basically, it's just rocks and minerals slowly breaking down over time, nature doing its thing. But as they break down, they release these salty minerals into the soil around them.
Okay, so that's nature's doing. What about us, though? Surely we're not making things better, are we?
You're right about that, unfortunately. One of the biggest things that messes with soil salinity, especially for lawns, it's using water for irrigation that's already got a lot of salt in it. This is a really common problem in areas where they have a lot of groundwater pumping going on. When they pull out too much fresh water, saltier water can actually seep in, and, well, you can guess what happens next.
Wait, so even if I don't live near the ocean, my poor lawn could be getting dosed with salt every time I water.
That's exactly right. And the reason that's a problem is this. Every time that irrigation water evaporates, it leaves those dissolved salts behind in the soil. It's kind of like if you kept adding a tiny pinch of salt to a glass of water every day. Eventually, that water would be way too salty to drink, right? It's the same basic idea for your grass.
So it's like we're accidentally pickling our lawns. That's the thought. But okay, so the salt builds up, but what does it actually do to the grass? I mean, it's more than just a little extra sodium, right?
Oh, for sure. Excess salt can actually stress out your lawn in a few different ways. One of the big ones is something called osmotic stress. And basically, it throws the whole water balance out of whack. See, that extra salt makes it harder for the roots to absorb the water they need, even if there's technically enough water in the soil.
So it's like the salt is messing with the lawn's ability to drink properly.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got to think about the salt that actually builds up inside the plant itself. Just like it's not good for us to have too much salt, it's not good for plants either. It can actually become toxic. Now, some grasses have gotten pretty smart. They develop adaptations to deal with this. Some of them even have these little salt glands that can actually push out the extra salt. But, even those have their limits.
So even those tough grasses, the ones that can handle a little salt, they can only take so much.
That's right. And it gets even trickier than that because this high salinity, it can actually mess with your lawn's ability to use the nutrients in the soil, even if those nutrients are there. It's like, well, think of it like this. That extra salt, it throws the balance off, makes it harder for the grass to absorb what it needs, even the essential stuff.
So even if I'm doing everything by the book fertilizing, the whole 9 yards of my lawn could still be struggling because of this hidden salt problem. That's crazy. Is there anything in that Oklahoma State guide, any examples of this nutrient chaos?
There are, actually. One thing they talk about is how high salt levels can mess with a plant's ability to take up magnesium. And magnesium, that's super important. It's one of the main ingredients in chlorophyll, the stuff that makes plants green.
Right. Okay, so salty soil can literally steal my lawn's glow up, huh?
Mm.
Man, this is all starting to sound kind of bleak. I'm about ready to rip it all out and just put in a cactus garden.
Now, hold on a second. Don't give up on that lawn just yet. The good news is, this guide we're looking at today, it's got some really practical solutions for dealing with salty soil.
Okay, that's a relief. I was about ready to go buy a whole herd of those salt-tolerant goats, haha. So what can our listeners actually do to fix this salty situation?
Well, first things first, you've got to figure out what you're working with, right? Remember those soil and water tests we talked about? Those are key. Think of them like a blood test, but for your lawn. Gives you the inside scoop on what's happening down there.
Knowledge is power, right? Especially when it comes to fighting salty soil. So what kind of stuff can those tests tell us?
They can give you the exact salinity levels both in your soil and in your irrigation water. Actually, the guide even mentions that even if the salt levels in your water seem kind of low, it can really add up over time. So yeah, don't underestimate that water test.
Wow, so even if my water doesn't taste salty, it could still be causing problems. That's definitely a good reminder to get those tests done. So let's say we've got our test results back. What's next?
From there, you can start looking at different strategies, and a lot of times they work best together. One of the common approaches is something called leaching. Basically, you're flushing out the extra salt from the root zone using, you guessed it, more water.
Oh, so like giving the lawn a good long drink.
Pretty much. But here's the thing. How well leaching works, it really depends on what kind of soil you've got. Sandy soils, they drain way faster than, say, clay soils.
Mm,
So knowing your soil type is going to help you figure out how much water you need and how long you need to keep it up to get those salts moving out.
that makes sense.
Sure.
This whole soil science thing, it's way more complicated than it seems on the surface. What about using something like rainfall to our advantage? Rainwater is naturally salt-free,
Now
right?
you're thinking. Taking advantage of rainfall, that's a great strategy. Even simple stuff like adjusting the slope of your yard just to make sure the water's flowing away from the house and not just sitting there, that can make a big difference. And if you're in an area that tends to get waterlogged, you might want to think about putting in something called French drains.
Drains, now those sound fancy. What are they exactly?
It's basically just trenches that are filled with gravel. They kind of act like an artificial drainage system. They can really help to redirect that excess water, make sure it's not pooling around your lawn and causing even more salt to build up.
This is great. So many good tips already.
Uh,
I'm actually starting to feel optimistic. Now, I'm curious about the grass itself.
Hmm.
Are all types of grass created equal when it comes to dealing with salt?
No way, not even close. One of the best things you can do is pick a turf grass that's known for being salt tolerant. And the best part, that guide we're talking about, it actually has a whole table that lists different grasses and how much salt they can handle. Super handy.
That's awesome. So depending on where I live and what my soil's like, I might be able to find a grass that can just shrug off that extra salt. Are there any superstars on that list? Any types that really stand out?
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're in a warmer climate, Bermuda grass is a good one to remember. It's actually pretty famous for its salt tolerance. They use it a lot in coastal areas for that very reason. For cooler spots, tall fescue and perennial ryegrass, those tend to be more salt tolerant. But of course, the best choice for you is always going to depend on your specific climate and your soil. It's like finding a good pair of shoes. It's got to be the right fit.
Exactly. And speaking of keeping things in tip-top shape, don't underestimate the power of aerating your lawn.
Oh, yeah, aeration. That's a good one.
Now, I know aeration is that something you do with wine, right?
Well, it's good for lawns, too. Haha.
Yeah.
Basically, you're just giving your lawn a chance to, well, breathe a little better. It creates some space in the soil, lets those roots really spread out.
So poking tiny little holes in the soil so it can breathe. Got it. I can get behind that.
Exactly. And they usually pair that aeration with something called top dressing, which is where they add a thin layer of compost or some other soil amendments on top, kind of like a spa day for your lawn. Really helps improve the soil structure and get that water moving where it needs to go.
Okay, a whole spa day for my lawn. I'm into it. So we've got testing, leaching, picking smart grass choices, aeration, top dressing. This is great. Any other secret weapons in the lawn care arsenal that we should know about? So many good tips. We've talked about testing and leaching, finding the right kind of grass, even giving our lawns a spa day with aeration and top dressing. But what about our irrigation systems? I mean, this supposed to be helping, right? Not making the problem worse.
You're right, they are. And the thing is, irrigation itself isn't the bad guy here. It's all about doing it the right way. Overwatering is a big one. That can really make those salinity problems a whole lot worse. It's like if you keep pouring water into a glass, eventually it's going to overflow and make a mess.
So how do we find that sweet spot, Enough water, but not too much. Keep the lawn happy, but not turn the whole thing into a salty swamp.
Smart irrigation, my friend. These days, there's some really cool tech out there that can help you get your watering schedule just right. Make sure the lawn's getting what it needs when it needs it.
Okay, now you're talking. Ditching the guesswork when it comes to sprinklers. That sounds good to me. So tell me more about this smart irrigation stuff.
All right, well, one of the most useful tools out there is called an irrigation planner. Basically, it helps you figure out exactly how much water your lawn actually needs. It takes into account things like what kind of grass you have, what your soil's like, even your local climate.
So no wondering if I'm giving it too much or not enough.
Exactly. And if you want to take it to the next level, you've got these things called smart controllers. They actually connect right to your irrigation system. And get this, they automatically adjust the watering schedule. They look at the weather forecast, even check how much moisture is in the soil.
Wait, hold on. Are you telling me that if it's supposed to rain tomorrow, this thing will actually know to hold off on the sprinklers?
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's like having a little robot gardener taking care of things. And one last thing. Don't forget about irrigation audits. That's where you get a pro to come out and take a look at your sprinkler system, make sure everything's working the way it should be.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
I've definitely had my fair share of sprinkler issues. And dry spots over here, soggy patches over there. Okay, so we've got our irrigation planners, our smart controllers, irrigation audits. This is all great stuff. Any other lawn care wisdom you can share before we wrap things up?
You know what? There's one more thing, and it's so simple you might not believe it. Mowing your lawn regularly. And here's the kicker bagging those clippings. It can actually help get rid of some of that excess salt that builds up in the grass blades.
Wow, really? So all this time I thought bagging the clippings was just about making my lawn look nice, but it's actually good for the grass itself.
That's right. It might seem small, but over time, it can make a real difference.
This has been amazing. We've covered so much ground today, from the nitty-gritty of salty soil to all kinds of practical tips and even some high-tech solutions. But if our listeners were only going to remember one thing from this whole deep dive, what would you say is the most important?
I think it all comes down to this, knowing your lawn. Take the time to really understand what it needs, get those soil tests done, get the water tested. Don't just guess. Your lawn, it's a living thing, a whole ecosystem right there under your feet. The more you understand how it all works, the better you can take care of it.
I love that. It's about working with nature, not against it. Well, there you have it, folks. With everything we've learned today about soil salinity and all the tools we have at our disposal, you're well on your way to turning that struggling lawn into the envy of the neighborhood. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of soil salinity. And remember, a happy lawn starts with understanding what's going on beneath the surface.